to another episode of The Conversation here on Falmouth Community Television. I'm co-host Onjalé Scott Price, along with the wonderful Reverend Will Mebane. Always a pleasure to be with you, Rev.
Good to see you. Honorable one. Yes, that's what I call you now. Honorable one. Yes.
Oh boy. All right. This is how it's going to go today, I see. All right. That's all right. Well, here at The Conversation, we discuss every month the topic surrounding race in our community, in our society. And so this month we decided we're going to talk about the arts and racism in the arts. So our first question today is, where do we find racism in the arts? So let's go see what our people on the street have to say about where we find racism in the arts.
But in the arts itself, we're all artists, we're all human beings, and we reflect the society that we live in. And so I'm sure, there was sort of racism in the arts. It's always, wherever you have human beings and that are subject to this type of system, and you're going to have racism. So it's something that's pervasive in the system. So it's nothing unusual.
First thing that I notice, and a lot of people notice actually, not just me, is the black students and brown students, they're more so encouraged to pursue athletics than the more artsy things, like going into the band like I was, or like the photography or whatever, or all the other arts things that they offer in school. And and then you have the people like me who were in the arts. Like I was in band, I was in jazz band, and I was in concert band and jazz band in middle school. And you start to notice certain things, like opportunities not being certain. Like the white kids, they get invited to these certain opportunities, but then it's like the black kids find out about it, and it's like, well, wait, why am I not here? And it's like, oh.
But one of the things that historically, like when you go to the museum and you see a lot of the African art from Benin, from Nigeria, from a lot of these societies in Africa who are very artistic, because that's part of life. As a human being, we are creative. We're creative human beings. So that's what we do naturally. And when someone goes and takes your work, your expressions, and uses it as an example of a society that's long dead or doesn't exist anymore, supposedly, but it's still the expression of that society, that culture. Like it'd be the same thing as if it was the other way around, and they would come and say, "Oh, this is an example of this white society. We'll take this, we'll put it in a museum to show how these uncivilized people are." So in that respect, there's been a lot of racism in the.
Welcome back. We have just heard from a few people on the street answering the question of where do we find racism in the arts. So I would like to welcome our two guests with us today and start to have some conversation about racism in the arts. So first, I'd like to welcome Mwalim, performer, teaching artist, curriculum development consultant, keyboardist, resident songwriter, tenured professor of English, and former director of Black Studies at University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth. We're really glad to have you here, Mwalim. Welcome.
Good. Now you started off with former. Is it that you were informed I was fired from that stuff and I didn't know, or?
Oh, I apologize. I will admit I got that off your website, so maybe I'm Are you still director of Black Studies?
I'm not the director of Black Studies, but at first when you said former curriculum, I was like, I don't do that anymore? Oh no.
My apologies. Please clarify that for us.
I'm like, that's a terrible way to find out I got fired. Wow.
All right. My apologies. Clarify for us a little bit then.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I should have also said comic street artist also. But
Yeah, clearly. Well, nonetheless, we're glad to have you with us. Thank you for being here.
All right. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we actually, I believe we heard from your son, correct? On where do we find racism in the arts?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you heard. Yeah, Zig, one of our people on the street.
Yeah, he mentioned students being encouraged to pursue athletics rather than the arts. And it sounded like he felt that from personal experience. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah, well, as you can probably tell from the video, he's a big boy. And when he was in 7th grade, the athletic director kind of started licking his chops and sort of encouraging him to consider football or consider basketball. In middle school, he did try playing baseball and ended up achieving a concussion as a result of playing baseball. So he kind of decided to leave that alone because he never got a concussion playing the drums. But what he noticed with a lot of his classmates, where they were being very strongly encouraged, and it was interesting because this wasn't just weren't just the coaches and the gym teachers, but just the student attitude as well as, oh, you should be going out for sports. Oh, you should be doing this. Oh man, you're big. You should be doing this. You should be doing that. And it's funny because what he began to notice was this encouragement seemed to almost exclusively go to the Black kids. You know, the obviously athletic white kids, but the Black and brown kids, it was sort of like, well, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? And so it was something that he noticed.
Mm.
You know, the fact that he never, he did try out for basketball once, but the fact that he never really tried out for anything never seemed to indicate that, I'm not interested in playing football.
Mm. Interesting.
And so that was something that he experienced. And when I asked his friends and some of his cousins, they all, and didn't even think about it because it is so normalized that you're Black or brown and you're big, so you're going to do sports. And that this is the opportunity, and the other piece they always try to tie it to is this is going to be the opportunity for you educationally. And, he especially laughs about it now because he just graduated high school and got a number of arts-related scholarships. And, they don't tell you that you can get arts-related scholarships. What it's always going to be is, your hope for college is going to be your athletics. This is the unconscious, again, thing that is, that's basically taught to our children and is, communicated to our children consciously and unconsciously. So, he picked up on a lot of things I noticed in school. I remember, I think it was a summer reading, he decided to read, he picked up on the autobiography of, "You're back, Robin, you're back. All right, you're back." No, I'm sorry. But during his summer reading, he read the autobiography of Malcolm X. And for your summer, at the end of the summer, one of the essays they always give you is, talk about a particular book or something that resonated with you and why. And what he wrote about was the autobiography of Malcolm X, and particularly the discussion that Malcolm X has with his teacher, where when he says he wants to be a lawyer and the teacher instead encourages him to be a carpenter. He related it to an experience of his 7th grade social studies teacher, who all through the year was telling us how great he's doing in class, how great he's doing in the class. And Zig noticed that the same teacher yelled at a white kid, for having a B- average, but then kept telling Morgan, "Oh, you're doing great, you're doing great." Morgan gets his final grade as a C. And it's like, that's great. And he sort of equated that same mindset to the mindset of the teacher who told Malcolm X, well, yeah, that's unrealistic. You should be a carpenter. And that was, that was his essay.
Right.
In regard to that. So he's always paid attention and noticed that type of thing about the system. And it's interesting because we came to the Cape full time when he was going into 3rd grade. So he pretty much went through the school system on the Cape, but he didn't even really have, say, the comparative of, growing up in the New York City school system. I have the comparative of the two and recognize racism in both, but in many ways, New York, even just on a pragmatic level, is leaps and bounds ahead of the concept of education with Black and brown students in the Cape. But there's certain dynamics that don't change, and there are certain dynamics that seem to remain here, rather archaic. But he's a young man who's rather sensitive to that.
Yeah, he seems like a very bright young man, and I absolutely loved his shirt that he had on during on the street portion as well. And I think the point of it's unfortunate how embedded and ingrained it is to just push the Black and brown students to anything athletic related and not so much the arts. So it's unfortunate that we still see that today.
It is. I mean, it definitely is a funny little thing about that shirt. He wore that. He actually bought that shirt especially for graduation. And when he crossed the stage for graduation, he first embraced his principal, who, by the way, I do have to say is one of the positives of education on the Cape, Mark Balistracci. One of the reasons why I kept him in Mashpee. But it was interesting because he stopped and he embraced Mr. Balistracci, giving him that respect. But then when he got to the superintendent, that's the point when you take your picture with your diploma and with the superintendent, with the school committee. He gave Mrs. DeBoer a pound, a fist bump, and then proceeded to rip his robe open and had that T-shirt under it. So you have a wonderful graduation picture of him with his robe ripped open with his T-shirt saying, "Not today, colonizer," and the superintendent looking like this. So, so I particularly love that T-shirt.
Yeah, it's a good one. Well, I'd like to ask Robin for some comments. Robin, I know you're a retired educator, artist, poet, and public speaker who taught in the New York City school system for over 30 years. Yes. And currently presenting a Black Lives Matter series with the Katuitt Center for the Arts. Now, to check, is all of that information correct?
That is all correct.
Okay.
Yes, I am a retired New York City teacher living here on Cape Cod. When I saw the question and I heard Vasco, he said that there's racism everywhere in society, and that's absolutely right. This topic is so vast because when I first saw the arts, as a person who worked as a facilitator for the arts, I know that there's the performing arts. And in the performing arts, we could break that down into drama and film and theater and music. And then we can go to, and television, and then we can go to the visual arts. And I think about going to the museum. So there's racism in all of those areas. There is no place in society, like Vasco said, where there isn't racism. I have certainly seen it in the museums, going to a museum and not seeing myself. When we don't see ourselves, we look for, I think the arts, we tend to look for reflections of ourselves in art. When we watch television, when we watch a movie, we're looking for a reflection of ourselves. When we go to the museum, we want to see something that reflects us. And when we don't, we omit it, which says that's a statement right there that we're not important, we're not valued. Or when we see negative situations, we also realize we're not valued. And right now, ever since coronavirus, and I have been doing audible books. Right now, I just finished yesterday, Cicely Tyson. What an amazing woman. I just want to say, I want to say that, first of all, I'm so taken with her. She is a jewel that we will miss because she was very careful in the roles that she chose, because she thought about how we are being viewed. And when she did Sounder, and I saw that in the 70s, that was the first really Black movie I saw, Sounder, and the love and what went on, the relationship. She didn't understand how whites viewed us. So watching those things are important. And I just want to read this because she said in that, a white man who did not see himself as the least bit prejudiced told Cicely that he was shocked as he watched Sounder that the son called his father daddy. That's what my child calls me. So as if that title is only reserved for white people. And a white woman said to her, she was shocked by the relationship between Rebecca and Nathan, the characters. She said the love and caring, that was not believable. So Cicely realized that she didn't realize so much ignorance abounded because journalists were asking her questions, and she was shocked because she took it for granted that they knew these things. So she decided that she would go around, especially in the 70s, because she said that was the Blaxploitation period. And she was not interested in being in the Blaxploitation. So she went around speaking at universities, talking about the roles and how important. And she also said why she felt Blaxploitation movies came so important to Black people, because after the Martin Luther King movement of passivity, Black men in particular wanted to show their sense of power and that they're going to fight back. And so these Blaxploitation movies gave people that opportunity to show a sense of strength and power and conquering. But her story has been amazing, and there's so many ways of looking at the arts and seeing where we're not there or we're disparaged. So yeah.
Yeah, really, really good points. I remember seeing last year that there was some movie coming out, and it was basically a horror. I remember, I think it might have been on Amazon. It was a horror movie about a Black family in the 60s, but supposedly had some twist to it. And I'm not really a horror film fan, but some friends were like, oh, you know, maybe we'll all watch this on Zoom together or something. And then I saw, you know, some of my friends like, well, you know, I'm sick of seeing movies where Black people are dealing with racism and Black people are being discriminated against. Like, you can do something that's a horror film with Black people where the antagonist is not racism. We can find something else to do. Like, there is more to Black people than just our plight of being discriminated against and oppressed. And so I think hearing about, you know, Cicely Tyson being so conscientious, I guess, of the roles that she takes, I think is really important to think about. What the importance of how we are perceived in media, because that not only affects how we feel about ourselves and our reflection of ourselves, but how we're portrayed, you know, to the greater masses.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Rev? Where do you think we find racism in the arts?
Well, the first thing I would share, and first let me say hello to Mwalim and to Robin. Good to meet Mwalim and to see my sister Robin again. I'm thinking about what happened to me in high school, hearing what Mwalim was sharing about his son. I did play sports, but I also was in music and also drama. And so I was able to squeeze it all in. But what I wanted to share is when it came time for the class play, it was assumed by everyone in the school that I would be the lead in the school play. And that was the annual school play that had been done for decades, right? And it was assumed that a white girl would be the female lead in the play. And we did mostly musicals, you know, Oklahoma and, you know, musicals like that. And so as we were getting close to, you know, casting, Surely, I got cast as the lead, and Meg, I'll never forget her, Meg Larrabee was her name, or is her name, I hope she's still alive, was cast as the female lead. And the school decided not to put on the play because they did not want a black male lead and a white female lead, on the chance that there might be a scene in the musical where they might have to express intimacy towards one another and, God forbid, maybe even kiss in the play. And so they canceled. In the first time in the history of the school, they canceled the school play purely because of that. So again, that came back to me as I was listening to Mwalim. And then there's been a lot of discussion already about television and film. And my undergraduate degree from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, is in radio, television, and motion picture production. And I've fancied myself of becoming a big-time, big-shot Hollywood director or producer someday, right? So I used to do films and short films and all, and I think I was pretty good at it. Got a degree in it, and but then I discovered early on that Hollywood at that time, and I'm not sure it's much different now, Hollywood is not really that interested in black folk being in the industry, as it's called. There were very few black directors, very few black producers. Robin was talking about, you know, we need to be able to see people who look like us, so it makes it clear that, oh yeah, I can do that. I can be that as well, right? That's not reserved just for white people. And so I gave up after some years of trying to break into the movie industry because it was, I needed one of three things. I either needed to have a rich uncle that was willing to bankroll my movie productions, which I didn't have. I needed to have the money myself, right, to be able to produce the movies, and obviously I didn't have that. Or I needed to be white, and there was nothing I could do about the fact that I wasn't. So that was enough to deter me from pursuing my career in the arts in film. Now I did ultimately get into television, and I spent several years working in the television industry, everything from a grunt, sort of production assistant, literally sweeping up the floor of the studio and dusting out off lights, to I became a producer, director, and executive producer. Then I got into management. But when I became a manager in a TV station at the age of 21, I was one of only two black managers in a department in a television station in the country. And that wasn't that long ago. I mean, I know Angie thinks I'm really old, but it really
That's not true.
wasn't that long ago. So, yeah, so those have been my personal experiences in where I've seen racism in the arts. Have you had any experiences like that, Angie? Have you dabbled in arts at all?
Definitely dabbled. I did tap dance as a kid, and I did piano, but I had a really bad habit of quitting something to try something else. So I did piano, and then I quit that to play basketball, quit that to play drums, quit that to do something else. I mentioned on another show is that I went to a lot of different schools growing up, switched schools every year from 2nd grade to 10th grade, and didn't move, but just switched schools every year. So it's really hard for me to remember specifics, but I know that I was never really involved in anything in school, arts related, because I was always switching schools. Like I just knew there was no point in me being super active in something, because the next year I was probably going to leave until I got to high school. And I played basketball in high school, and I wasn't good. So, but nobody pushed me to the arts. Nobody said like, oh, you're not good at athletics, maybe try something arts. They were just like, oh, well, you suck at basketball. I don't know what to tell you.
So become a scientist instead. Just be a scientist, maybe.
Well, actually, when I told my physics professor I wanted to be an engineer, he was like, do you really think you can do that? We should probably do a whole show on.
That's another show, definitely.
That's a whole nother show. Anyway, Robert, I think he wanted to say something.
What I wanted to say is as an art teacher, the first thing I wanted to do was make sure that students knew that they were Black artists. In fact, and that's what I want to do when I get to, as I've been given that great position at Katuitt Center for the Arts, to be on the board and to be developing these Black Lives Matter series. But when I started teaching, the first thing I did was look up African-American artists, Jacob Lawrence. We can rattle off Matisse, Monet, Picasso, Michelangelo, Da Vinci, just Renoir. People I asked some people, can you name a master Black artist? And people can't. So I made a point to teach myself about the artists, to bring them into the classroom and to make children understand not only Black artists, but since I had the whole world in my school, it was important to teach about the Asian artists, to teach about, if I had Native American, if I had children from whatever country, Mexican artists, Frida. So it was important to show, because our focus in the Blueprint for the Arts was to show that every culture participates in the arts, of course, in everything in the world, but certainly the arts. And another thing, I had to just bring this up. Benin, when I heard Vasco talk about Benin, excuse me, but when I did my DNA, that was my number one. And I was walking around saying, okay, I'm from the kingdom of Benin, to the point where my husband said, oh, Lord, here we go. Because in the bathroom, I have a DNA bathroom, and he calls it my Dynasty of Negro Ancestry bathroom, because that's what he said, DNA. Oh, that's obviously, because I said, I'm from the kingdom of Mali and the kingdom of, and he was like, oh, here we go with her and her kingdom. So, and this other thing that happened, a white man in Zion came to me the day after I found out that my highest percentage was Benin. He said, are you familiar with Benin art? I said, excuse me, sir, but you're looking at Benin art. But this piece right here, okay, this Vasco was saying something about how when they show our old art, I am so proud of Benin art, because these medals in the 1400s, when the Portuguese went to Nigeria, they thought that white people created it, because they did not know how to create these molds and these pieces. So they believed that white people did it. And the article I just read this week in the New York Times, these many European museums are returning it because they stole African art, even though they don't give us the credit. We're primitive and all of that stuff. They stole this art, these pieces, and put them in the European museums. So that's a piece that I'm upset about. Also, Picasso got his whole cubism from African sculpture. And then they have the nerve, because Romeo Bearden, a Black man, they said that he got his designs, his thoughts, his abstract art from Picasso. No. It came from Africa. So there's so many the racism goes in so many areas, as we look at art, as they tell us that our African art is primitive art, yet it's honored in secret. Okay, I'm done.
I hope you're not done, but Mwalim,
okay, but I just had to get that out there, because I am so proud. This room, oh, by the way, up here, see that up there? That's some African. You are looking in my Sankofa lounge and cafe. This room it's got African artifacts all over the room, because I used to be ashamed of being of African descent, but that day is no more. So
I am here for it.
Hey.
Well,
I am an African.
Mwalim is taking us now to his show and tell, right?
Yes.
No, I was just moving away from the kitchen noises. However, I moved out of the light, my bad. All right, here we go. What I enjoyed with that, what it brought to mind, was being born in 1968. I mark that because when I look at what happened as a result of the George Floyd murder and the sort of response to that, and recognize, no, that's the exact same response y'all had in 1968 after April 4th.
Hmm.
It's a comforting that they try to play. But being born in 1968, what happens is the concepts of Black is beautiful becomes normalized. Because by the time you're 5 years old, the dashiki, the afro pick are all part of Madison Avenue. So you have a very, very different concept, and you're set up for a very different concept of how things are. And it was sort of like 1980 became that brick wall, because 1980 was the official reclamation of white supremacy in the United States. And it was a brick wall for us. So, it becomes the thing of Amiri Baraka is somebody who we know about in childhood. The Wiz is on Broadway. Lofton Mitchell's Bubbling Brown Sugar is on Broadway. The Rockefeller Foundation is pumping money into the new Federal Theater in Lower Manhattan. So Black theater is normalized in New York City for all of us. So Black arts, you have the Schomburg, which becomes key to our experience as young Black artists. You have the Barry Harris Jazz Cultural Theater, the Blue Note, all of which are very openly celebrating the Black connection of art. You have, the Nuyorican Poets Cafe, which is now even acknowledging that, yeah, most of your Puerto Ricans are Spanish-speaking African people. A very interesting artistic acknowledgement. So that becomes a sort of intersectionality point for us. So Black art for us is normalized, but then discovering we're the last generation of that in many ways. And you see it reflected in the fact that the people born between 1964 and 1973, we bring that to college. That's why hip hop has Public Enemy and X-Clan. Because we were the children listening to Stokely Carmichael and to Bobby Seale. Again, what they had to say was, a normalized part of our childhood. But then with that sort of indoctrination, it becomes an interesting thing, because I remember I was part of a theater, still part of a theater company in Boston called New African Company, which is actually New England's oldest continuous professional Black theater. Started 1968. It's actually 1 week older than I am. And it was started by one of the Black arts movement pioneers, the late James Sproul, who was a part of the Black arts movement, theater movement in New York City in the 60s, and was a professor at Boston University. But he was one of the founders of New African Company. So you had New African Company, so we had this indoctrination. New African Company basically was the training place for virtually every Black theater artist between 1968 and probably 1990, if they were doing theater, passed through New African Company at some point of their training. So you have this, and then when I come back to the Cape after graduate school in '93, I'm like, okay, cool, I'll audition for theater. So I go to one theater company. I won't say the name, but they're in Falmouth. They let me audition, and then they tell me, that was great. And we're thinking of doing 12 Angry Men or maybe To Kill a Mockingbird, and we think you'd be great in that. And if we do it, we'll give you a call. But by the way, they still haven't done either of those shows. So I go audition for another theater company. And I won't give you their name, but they're located in Barnstable. And they were doing Brigadoon. And they stopped me in the lobby at the audition for Brigadoon. And ironically, I even have Scottish ancestry, but we won't go into that. But anyway, with this experience, you had a number of Black artists, actors, dancers, et cetera, on the Cape who'd had this experience. And you had one little project called the Black Theater Ensemble that had started out of Cape Cod Community College, and they were doing different things, but in terms of any kind of like continuous or open activity. There was nothing there. So we ended up forming a company called Oversoul Theater Collective, which became the first professional Black and Native theater and arts organization on Cape Cod. And we started doing theater, and it was interesting to see the sort of pushback, because what the story became was, oh, well, you're presenting Black theater, that's racist, because why can't you include, and not recognizing you guys already do Shakespeare, you already do O'Neill, you already do that, but you don't do Baraka, you don't do Bullings, you don't do Wilson, you don't, you don't do Hansberry, and y'all like her. You don't even do Hansberry. Mm-hmm. You don't even want to do the middle of the road stuff, let alone the hardcore stuff. And it was interesting to see the pushback was because we wanted to do the art that was by, for, and about us. The pushback from the white companies were, oh, you're separating yourselves and not realizing. And of course, then what the gaslighting becomes is, well, we don't produce Black theater. And it was always a question of the quality of the work. We don't produce it because the message isn't universal. So, that was the theater experience. Now let me switch hats to my musician side. When you had Black and Brown owned venues, Black and Brown musicians on Cape Cod had some place to play regularly, where I could say non-politically. When all of those venues were forced out of business, anytime you see a Black-led or primarily Black or Brown music ensemble perform at any of the venues on the Cape, it's a political experience. It can't simply be, we hire, it can't simply be, for example, we hired the Ruvalatos. It has to somehow be connected to some demonstration of how progressive they are. That they hired, they hired an all Black and Brown band, the interesting thing that we see, if you want the music organizations on Cape Cod to deal with Black or Brown people, they either need to be famous or dead.
Can I say, I'm going to make sure, because Tuit Center for the Arts has me in there. So I will be looking to see, when we have parties or different events, I'll be looking for you and your group.
Thank you very much, because the only reason, now here's a very funny thing.
I will be making those recommendations.
I definitely appreciate. I definitely appreciate, because the only reason the Grubelatos got in there was because of the Heritage Museum, as in, for example.
Right. No. But they called me for this, so I'm doing it for a purpose. It's not about me. It's about bringing it, and they are looking. See, they asked me. They said it's time for, and this might be part of question number 2. So I don't know if I should be talking.
Let's say this might be a really good transition to our question 2, is how can we address racism through art? So let's quickly go to our people on the street, see what they have to say about how we can address racism through the art, and then we'll come back to our panel. I'm really looking forward to see what you guys have to say about that.
I use my art to express how I feel about life, what it means to be a human being, what is it that, what is culture? So my art reflects my culture. My art reflects some of the difficulties that my culture has. And so I'll have things that kind of express a feeling of not so much rage, but a feeling of disappointment that another human being would treat another human being in such a way because we're all the same. We're all created equal. You know, we're human beings, and so I try to express that in my work.
Well, it's always important for people to see someone who's like themselves, especially, you know, like I said, you know, the brown kids, because seeing a brown person in any kind of art, whether it be, you know, a brown person making music, writing music, or even like in film and television, seeing that is just going to make all of the other brown kids around the world be like, that could be me one day. We need that. That is a good thing to have. All right. We can't forget that's a good thing to have. And also we just have to remember there's also the difference between actual representation and, let's say, like tokenism.
All right, so back to our lively conversation. How can we address racism through art? And Robin, I think you were getting ready to say something before we broke, but I want to make sure that at some point we definitely comment on Morgan's comments about seeing yourself reflected in the art, which we talked about a little bit, but go ahead, Robin.
Okay, first of all, how do we make changes? I'll tell you, New York City has made some changes, because that's definitely, because when they came up with the blueprint for the arts, what they realized, the Annenberg family put billions of dollars into the system for the arts, because they realized that in this urban community of New York, and New York is a mecca for the arts, the actors and the performers were not coming from the New York City schools. That's why they started training New York City students in the arts, because they said they need to be patrons of the arts. They need to be the artists. They can be the dancers, the performers. So that's why that fueled the whole program of the arts. And so, and in the curriculum, they put they really made a multicultural study. So now Faith Ringgold, Jacob Lawrence, different people were written into the curriculum so that it changed. So I saw that change there. Cape Cod is a really small community, and we've got to help Cape Cod grow in this way. That's why you're doing this show. That's why they, you know, when the George Floyd event, murder happened, that's when your show got started. That's when Katuit asked me to come, because they said it's time for white people to hear Black stories and to listen. So that's what we're doing, and that's a beginning.
And this exactly touches on what Morgan said, seeing yourself reflected in the arts, seeing yourself reflected in the media, and what that can really mean to people, and especially to young people. Yeah, go ahead, Mwalim.
Oh, what I was gonna say. Slight correction. He's Zig.
I'm sorry, say it again.
He got tagged as Morgan, but he's Zig, Z-Y-G.
Oh, Zig. Is that his full name or his nickname?
Zig is the name that he's known by more so.
I have a nephew named Ziggy, so that's pretty cool. His name is Zinyaza, but Ziggy is what we call him. So
okay, yeah, we call him, but we've been calling him Ziggy since he was born, but Zig is the more, I guess, adult, mature version of it.
Okay, he into it. All right, that's cool.
But yeah, he only gets called Morgan when he's Morgan or Junior if he's in trouble. But other than that, nonetheless,
good to know. Good to know.
He hasn't been in that much trouble, so. One of the things that we started doing, and it was sort of like making COVID a workable thing. We ended up opening Polyphonic Studio during the pandemic shutdown because things were already kind of rolling. And since pretty much all the musicians involved, we were all around each other anyway. A bunch of them live at my house. Anyhow, what we found was we're musicians, we have a studio. So we start making music. And what we began recognizing and one of the things I looked at actually goes back to 1990 when I went to England and realized how racist the music genre structure is in the United States. And then researching music genre structure and finding out that, okay, the pop chart means white, middle class, urban, and that's what it's always meant. And then you had poor white rule, which was initially called the hillbilly chart, then eventually the country chart, and now the Americana chart. And then you had the Negro chart, which then became the R&B chart, which became the soul chart, which became the urban chart, which is now back to being the R&B soul / urban. So now they have all the names, put in there, and realized how racially divided the concepts of music in the United States are. And of course, then going to Europe, where you have a pop chart, and it's big, so also like Aerosmith and Public Enemy and X-Clan and Ricky Martin, everybody's all on the same list based on do people like their music or not. And what we began to also look at was the fact that you have, when you look at the Cape Cod scene, you have Black jazz players, soul players, R&B players. You have folk players. Gabriella Simkin is somebody I think of as like a folk jazz guitarist, vocalist, comes to mind. You have Afro punk. You have people like Shadow Master out of New Bedford, Tony Mendoza, who's a Mexican-American metal singer. And we begin to look at Black and brown people making music outside of the expected genre. And we started saying, so now what if we all just start banding together? And ended up sort of creating a movement, if you will, called the South Coast Thumpin' Soul Movement. And it's a cross-genre movement of Black and brown artists. And what we started doing was supporting each other. We started putting out music every single month on streaming services. And we've been sending it out to people, sending out the links to people. We created a Spotify playlist that now has about 3,500 followers worldwide. And every month we're putting these Black artists, Native artists, Latina artists, etc., out and supporting the music and supporting the plays. And people are getting plays, people are getting spins, people are getting feedback. And so, like I said, hip hop, house music, soul, rock. And that's one of the ways, when it comes down to readopting, if you will, some of the initial principles that Marcus Garvey laid out in terms of self-determination, economic and social self-determination. These are some of the steps that we can take when we start to curate and support our own motion, our own movement. The blueprints were there, but in a very different fashion. For example, you have people like Berry Gordy, where his goal was to sort of break the barrier down to even calling, the slogan for Motown was the sound of young America, not young Black America, but the sound of young America. And even having to do compromises like putting out album covers that didn't have photos on them, that instead had artwork so that it could sell down south. And, things of that nature. But you look at that blueprint and it's like, okay, now let's take it a step further. What if it's like, all right, we're gonna be the sound, we're the sound of the South Coast. We're what you hear coming out of people's car stereos. We're what people are actually listening to. And we're that music. And then of course it also gets around the whole issue of, all right, the venues that don't want to hire us, we create our own venues. In 2017, when the Groovalados came out with an album, what we decided to do to support that album was we actually went and bought a generator and started playing out in the streets. We started playing outside in Provincetown and Harwich. We went to Boston, we went to New York City, we went to Worcester, we went all over, and we would just set up and have a guerrilla performance. And what we would do is research the town laws in regard to free speech, and free speech was, yes, you can perform out in the street. So, go out there and perform in the street. And that was how we built a following, and that was how we got Grammy nominations. And that was how we got noticed by people who could nominate us for Grammys. So it was sort of like, this became a control, our own control of the venue. And of course, the fun thing was playing Provincetown and realizing in a shorter amount of time, you made more money playing on the street than you did playing in any of the bars in Provincetown. So, little things like that. But when it becomes not just artistic self-determination, but when you tie it into economic self-determination, and when you tie it into curatorial self-determination, that's why venues like the Zion Union Heritage Museum are so important, because that is our venue. The inroads that Robin has made into the Katuitt Center for the Arts, so that now the vision of its original founder is being revisited. It's being, forcibly revisited. That's the kind of thing that needs to happen. Because when I talk about the shutdown of our venues, the disappearance, the unfortunate closing of Joe's Twin Villa, the closing of the Mill Hill Club, the closing of what used to be the Casbah / Compass Lounge up in Yarmouth. All of these different venues that worked with Black artists, Black performers that are now gone. It now becomes a matter of we need to curate our own because we're not going to be let in. We're not going to be let in. If we get in, it's because we kick the door in. You know, it's like James Brown said, I don't need you to give me nothing, just open the door and I'll get it myself. It's still that way. So, you know, that's what it has to be artistically, but it has to be, as artists, one thing that hasn't changed, Roland Hayes performed at Symphony Hall because Roland Hayes rented out Symphony Hall. Right. And we need to go back to that. We need to recognize that we can't just be the artist, we have to be the curator as well.
God bless the child who has his own, you know, so yeah. So we do have to own it. We do have to take some ownership and start some stuff. But I do have faith that there's some openings that can happen. And I have to have that faith. I have to believe that. And we have to keep trying and doing, but we do need to be we need to be able to own our own and to control the control. I mean, that's why so many Black producers and directors, people look at Tyler Perry. Tyler Perry said when they did not bring him, I just heard this from Cicely, when they don't give you a seat at the table, bring your own folding chair, you know, bring your own chair. And instead of him bringing a chair, he set up his own table by buying a whole company and on the plantation, on a Southern plantation, you know, his whole corporation and his building. So we have to do that. We have to take charge. And that's
This is why we launched the South Coast Thumping Soul, because it's us putting our music out, controlling our marketing, controlling our music. And it becomes also one of the lessons, because Zig is one of our artists. And as my son, one of the things basically teaching him, okay, you want to be a producer, you want to be an artist, that's great. You want to get signed, tell you what, it's a lot better to go to a label with you, having been your own label, with actual numbers to show your sales and to show your marketing and to show, you know, you're coming in now with firepower as opposed to somebody who's just saying, I got a dope tape, hook me up. You know, no, when you're coming in with, no, these are my marketing figures, these are my sales, these are my streams for the last, you know, however many months, this is how many songs I've put out, and this is what each song has done. And, you know, and you're basically doing it on a shoestring budget. Imagine if you put real money behind it. That's firepower. That's what it is when it's our own. When we approach Katuitt Center for the Arts, for example, as an individual artist, that's power. When we approach them as our own organization, simply trying to work with them as a venue or as a collaborator, that's a whole, you know, that's a whole different swag. Yeah. And that's how we need to prep ourselves.
Yep.
I'm thinking about how we can create some of those venues that aren't around anymore, because you're talking about, Mwalim, you're talking about the South Coast group. I think that
South Coast Thump
consists of a whole diverse, use that word, so like diverse offerings there. I mean, maybe we ought to do a whole weekend or a whole month or something of bringing those groups together and letting them do their thing. And Robin's got the insight now at Katuitt, so maybe we do it at Katuitt, or maybe we find
do it at Katuitt.
You know, do it,
oh yeah.
Do it at Katuitt. I want you to remember I said that. Do it at Katuitt.
At Katuitt. I like that.
You realize that's their line.
I don't know that.
Yes, no, you didn't pick it up. We got T-shirts that say "Do it at Katuitt."
Okay,
I like that.
Sorry,
you're
a little late on that.
So,
I thought you knew that. Okay.
But what I was going to say was what we've started doing is like, for example, if you go to the polyphonicstudios.com website, you'll see a link for the Truly Cape Cod Jazz Fest. One of the first things we did, and it was because of COVID, we got a bunch of jazz artists from all over the country to video themselves performing. and we cut it together into episodes. And we got an actor from longtime collaborator of mine, actor from Boston named Naheem Garcia, to be our host. And we have it up on YouTube, and all you can do, you can click it and you can see some of the, you know, great jazz artists. And the reason why we did the Truly Cape Cod Jazz Fest, these are folks you never see on Cape Cod, who are now social media hashtag linked to Cape Cod permanently. But and you know, but it's that type of thing, because one of the things in my research that I uncovered was there was a Northern Chitlin circuit. You see, once you got north of New York, you were back down south. So there were those pockets and venues that you knew, I can play this place in Connecticut, I can play here in Providence, I can play here in New Bedford, and then back in the day, there are these places I can play on Cape Cod before I go up to Boston, and after Boston, I'd go out to Springfield and back down to Hartford. That was the northern, I call it the sauteed Chitlin circuit, but that was the northern leg of that circuit. And you know, and a lot of it still exists, because you know, artists or bands that we know from the 70s, like the Tavares family, for example, they were part of that circuit. LTD and Jeffrey Osborne, you know, grew out of that circuit. So that circuit, you know, was a very, very relevant circuit. That circuit, in fact, still existed. That was the circuit New Edition cut their teeth on before going national back in the Candy Girl days. So, you know, these situations existed. But yeah, the Truly Cape Cod Jazz Fest was basically sort of like trying to revisit Cape Cod's role in that circuit, if you will. And like I said, it's on there. Go to the website, click the link, watch it. Some great performances on there. And, you know, we're going to try to do it live. But the other thing is, what we've been doing are bits and pieces of it all over the place. So Katuitt Center for the Arts would be a great place to do it. We did it back in May, when we were reflecting upon the murder of George Floyd, the event that took place, the Away with Words event that took place in the Hyannis Village Green. That was a South Coast Thump. The music that took place there was part of the South Coast Thump. When we do the Lope Square shows during the summer, that's going to be South Coast Thump. That's the Groovalatos. That's going to be the Afro punk, the funk, the hip hop, and so forth, just spontaneously happening. So it seems out in the streets of Provincetown. So the thing is, we're moving it around definitely, but whatever venue we can hit it with, that's what we're trying to do.
So give us the website address again. It's Polyphonic
Studios.
Polyphonicstudios.com.
.com.
All right, cool, very good. Listen, we got to draw this to a close in a few minutes, but I wanted to, because you're both educators, Robin and Mwalim, this is a question that I was holding in response to, what do we do to address racism in the arts, right? So you're both educators. My guess is that there ought to be some things within our institutionalized educational systems, right, that can begin to address this. I love what Robin was saying earlier about how quickly we can name off Matisse, Renoir, Monet, et cetera, et cetera. We can't do that with Black artists, so we got to start teaching, right?
Yes.
Those artists. But give me, each of you, give me your thoughts. We'll start with you first, Robin. Give me your thoughts.
Okay, so my thoughts are that one, I have a Black Lives Matter series at Katuitt. I'm thinking about, and that's slideshow. So I'm thinking about doing some for children, where I do Mrs. Miller's Classroom, and I teach about some of the African-American artists through slides for children. But I met up with someone in the park who is white, and she's a lawyer, and her husband, both of them are trying to work with the school system here. She writes grants. So these are the kinds of things, and she connected me to the Black principal here at in Marston's Mills of the elementary school. So they want me to do like a curriculum development. So my thing, even when I was a facilitator, one of the things I did was look at the school curriculum and bring the arts into that and figure out how to work the arts into the curriculum and teach. So in New York, when we were teaching New York City, I was working the Harlem Renaissance story in there. So these are the kinds of things that can be done. We need to get connected to the schools, do things with the schools. I'm going to do what I can at Katuitt Center for the Art, and then get schools or children and people to come there and start paying attention to, what I'm going to try and develop my own kind of thing. So I'm just a hands-on, I'm going to do this thing. And, that's what we have. That's a start, because people are coming to me saying things. Once you get started and you get out there, I have people then saying, hey, what about this? Or what about that? So the more you have a voice, the more you come on shows like this, you get known, people see you, they ask questions, and opportunities arise. And I'm always prayerful that I always work within the spirit and believe that my faith is going to bring stuff to me.
Oh, yeah, you singing my song now.
Oh, sorry. Cicely said that too. Cicely felt the spirit. And so I'm always believing, for me, I feel that God brought me here. He connected me to a church here. And oh, by the way, I just got to tell you this. Speaking of art and racism, I got my white church to take down white Jesus, and they're putting up black Jesus in the church. And so I'm just letting you know. So I almost was ready to leave the church and go, okay, like Iyanla, my work here is done. Time to move on to another white church. But no, I love my church. And in fact, we're going to be doing something this Sunday. We're doing a Langston Hughes poem that's about race. And that church has really been, they're on point. West Parish of Barnstable. I love my church, and I had to put that plug in there.
Yeah, you're gonna don't say too much more, because you're gonna be taking people from my church coming to your.
I'm sorry. No, but they're all the way in Falmouth, so only the people close here. This is in Marston, this is in Barnstable. So anyway,
Mwalim, let's hear how we can, what the education system can do. What can happen within education to change this racism in arts?
Okay. Well, first I should say I grew up in St. Joseph's Episcopal Church and didn't realize that the Episcopal Church was not entirely West Indian until I went to see St. John the Divine's, because I thought that, my mother's family comes from Barbados, which is an Episcopal island. So suddenly discovering that there are white people in this church. Wait a minute, what? Anyway. But that aside, in education, one of the things that I've started doing is dealing with the specific. I don't use the term racism. I talk about white supremacy straight up, because racism leaves too much room for equivocation around, oh, well, everybody's racist. And then you have to talk about the definition of racism as opposed to race prejudice and that kind of thing. So what I do is cut right to the chase. The problem in this country is white supremacy, and address it exactly as such. In terms of teaching the arts, a lot of it is, some of it is around the content. I realize I'm getting students who've been through 12 to 14, 15 years of education and never had a Black man standing in front of them teaching a class. And the sort of like obstacles you have to overcome with each class, that you have to understand, yes, I'm funny, but I'm not a comedian. I'm dead up serious about my topic. I'm funny because I'm comfortable with the topic. Now, I have expectations. A lot of them feel a certain way when they find out that their work, number one, is going to be judged by a Black man, and the Black man's not there saying, oh, it's perfect, but instead is actually critiquing them on it. It's interesting to see the reactions to that. So a lot of the indoctrination for them is even just the experience of having me as their teacher for a creative work or a creative process. But a lot of it is also just in terms of the materials that they're introduced to, in terms of what gets worked into the curriculum. And I would say, in terms of the dynamics, especially as an artist or as a teaching artist, it has to be a very holistic approach. You can't do it, what was it Ivan Van Sertima used to say, passion is voice of an academic. When we're teaching about ourselves, we can't do it in the passionate voice of an academic because it's too real. I remember hearing those words from Dr. Van Sertima, 1989 MIT, but, and just sort of absorb them and realize that as a teaching artist, it's very holistic because who you are becomes part of what you teach. What your experiences are become part of, are part of your collective unconscious, to borrow from Jung, and therefore becomes part of the experience, becomes part of the classroom experience for your students. And oftentimes that is the big resistance that students have when encountering a Black or brown teacher. But that's also part of our struggle and part of our challenge in that role.
Need more Black teachers.
Yes.
Absolutely. Any last thoughts, Rev?
I'm going to toss it to you. It's I'm full. I feel rich. I've learned. I've been I'm babbling. Thank you both. White supremacy, not racism. White supremacy, not racism. That's I'm taking that with me too. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you both for this incredible conversation. Mwalim, good to see you, and Robin, good to see you as well. And we want to say a special thank you to Deb and Alan at FCTV for continuing to produce this show with us. And until next time, thank you all for being here today, and see you soon, Falmouth.